Okay, for our viewers at home, introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your film without giving away too many spoilers.
Absolutely. So my name is Charlotte Wincott, and I'm sitting here with my husband, Jeff Wincott, but I'll let him introduce himself. I am a writer, director. I'm actually a scientist by training, and that's sort of my day job, but I sort of love making films because it gives me the chance to make films that have science themes. So with the latest film that is in the Big Bear Film Summit, The Issue with Elvis, it is a story about a retired botanist who knows everything there is to know about fungi, and he uses it, and he uses his knowledge of science to treat his rheumatoid arthritis. So he basically is able to isolate the different things from the different fungi, but he actually retired from the science world because he couldn't get grants anymore, which is something that I know about being for a while from academia. So he's basically lives in the woods. He's a loner, and he runs across this runaway boy who is living in a broken down school bus on in Lake Shawnee, which is a West Virginia site. And he takes the boy in, and they become friends. He starts to uncover some mystery about the child who comes from a troubled background, and then and the rest of the story I won't ruin it, but it's a nice relationship between the two.
Awesome. Where did the inspiration for the story come from?
It's funny. I was just mentioning this to John as well. So we when we were right before the pandemic hit, we were going to shoot a different film that I had written about 5 years ago on bipolar disorder. We were getting ready to start, and then the pandemic hit. We were living in New York, and we moved back to DC. It was pretty, as everybody knows, it was crazy in New York at the start of the pandemic. And so we were isolating, and we were doing all of the things that we were supposed to do, but we were doing a lot of these hikes through the woods in the DC area, Rock Creek Park. And we just, we were walking through the woods, and we would look at the fungi, and I would think, I used to love the fungi when I was a biology student, and I would think, oh, the hyphae under the ground. I was getting really excited, telling my son about it and showing him, the pages from my biology book. And I just started thinking about this story. And I was telling John as well. We saw First Blood, and I was thinking, a guy in the woods with this kind of like long hair, and he's a retired botanist. And I just started sort of building the ideas, thinking about, what I had to work with, which is my son and my my husband, who we were a nuclear family, so we were able to work together when you can't hang out with anybody else or do anything with anybody else. So that's sort of how it came to fruition. And I've studied psychiatry just in sort of my regular career, and in neuroscience, so I know a lot about that. So the idea of sort of the background of the child was just sort of part of what I do and see every day. So it all kind of came together in that way.
Why the name Elvis? Why did you pick the name Elvis for the boy?
So why I chose that name? And that's another good question. So I grew up kind of listening to Elvis Costello. My brother would make me these mixtapes, and I just thought, what is, I don't know what made me think of it. I was listening to what's that? I forgot his name. It's the Steve something band, but he had a whole album about West Virginia. I was listening to that and the miners in West Virginia, and I was listening to Elvis Costello, and I just decided. Yes, that's it, Zero. And I just was listening to Elvis Costello, and I was thinking about sort of, always talking about Elvis Costello with my brother, and I don't know, it's just one of these little light bulbs that came up. I know it makes people think, oh, Vegas, etc., but it's really, there's a funny story as to why he says Elvis.
So you take the story, you write the story. So the next step is the locations. Where did you film this film? Because it's beautifully shot. I mean, it's just so wonderfully shot. Tell us a little bit about the locations, because locations play a big part in this film, and it's a character within itself.
No, that's a wonderful question. And I'm so glad you appreciate that, because we really spent a long time trying to find beautiful locations that we would be able to go to, because there were all these crazy rules and we followed all of them, as many as we possibly could with the pandemic. So you couldn't go here and you couldn't do this, but we basically filmed, there was a cabin in Shenandoah, I think it was Tyro, Virginia, just absolutely beautiful. And we got it on Airbnb, and she was so excited that we wanted to use it, but it was perfect. It just looked perfect. And we had scoped these out. Jeff helped me too. We would go through the different options, and also just the surrounding areas in Shenandoah looked enough like West Virginia. And I used to go to West Virginia for one of my first jobs as a medical science person. And I used to go to Cooper's Rock, which is in outside of Morgantown. And I just thought, West Virginia is so gorgeous. And if you could just sort of convey that, but at the time, West Virginia was hard to shoot in West Virginia because they had different sort of COVID rules. So we basically followed all of the rules, but we did actually have to go to West Virginia to shoot in Lake Shawnee. So we were looking, where's a cool place we could get a school bus? And it's just a lot of lore on Lake Shawnee that was so fascinating to me just when I was doing the research. And we reached out to the guy who has Lake Shawnee, and he was so cool and nice and let us shoot there. And it sort of made it, but we took each location sort of piecemeal, where we were able to get permits. Richmond, they were really nice to us with permits. We did a little bit in the streets of Richmond. And so it was based on sort of like the COVID restrictions, what was beautiful, who we knew, and who would let us shoot there without all these pandemic rules. Anything you want to add?
No, you covered it.
So it's basically run and gun. You basically had to invent the process as you went along, because we've never been through these pandemic rules before in filmmaking.
No, it was so crazy. I mean, Jeff, so because I work a bazillion hours in my regular job. And so I would go to work, and Jeff was doing just so much legwork on getting, because you have to have child permits to use children, even if he's our son. So we had to do that. But we also had to pay attention to what the COVID rules were. It was okay because we were a nuclear family, but then you couldn't go over some lines because some of the state lines were like, hey, you have to quarantine for. So we had to follow all this. And Jeff did this tremendous amount of work to figure out, what the rules were, whether we could film there, whether it looked good, and so it's sort of, he made a lot of these things happen based on his hard work when I was working at my regular job.
So Jeff, if you don't mind asking, what do you do for a living? Is filmmaking it?
No, I act and I make films, produce films.
And he's a dad. He's an amazing dad, and that's a really full-time job. Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, going through this experience together as a family, what did you learn about yourselves as a couple, as a husband and wife team? And did you guys grow as a couple through this filmmaking process?
I love these thought-provoking questions. You're really good at this. Go ahead.
Yeah, great question. I think that we did. And as a matter of fact, I was telling Wolfgang, our son, this morning. I said, as we're getting in the car and getting ready to drive up here, I was saying, this is something that we're going to remember for the rest of our lives. The fact that we did this film together as a family, that we're heading up to the world premiere of our film in Big Bear. I mean, it's just an incredible experience that we got the chance to share together as a family, as actors, as creative people. I mean, it was a really, incredible, creative melting pot that we had to work with. And, I think it's something we'll always remember. But I think as far as a family, there were times where we butted heads. It's like, it's normal. We do that anyway as a couple. But when you get on set, and you've got and Charlotte would always say, I'm the director. And I was like, okay, all right. I've been in the business 40 years. It's like, let me get my 2 cents in. She's like, I'm the director. I wrote this. This is my, like that whole thing. So I think that there's a lot of trust that comes with this, trusting, myself, trusting Charlotte as a director, a first-time director, and she did an amazing job, but just having that trust. And, and I think we just grew as a family. I mean, being able to work together in a cabin in the middle of the woods. We spent 5 days there. It was so funny because we rented the cabin for 5 days. And I was like scared being out there in the middle of nowhere,
it's like nowhere,
thinking
right?
about the bears and, you name it. And it's in the middle of the night. It's like, it was so quiet. And it was like, we had 1 day left of shooting. It was a Saturday night. We're shooting on Sunday. And Charlotte was like, you know what? We got to stay in a hotel tonight. I can't take it. So we went, we stayed in a nice hotel. And the next day we came back and shot that last day, you know, at the cabin.
Well, it was, it's so scenic and beautiful, but and that seemed like he was authentic as the sort of like, fungi guy who lives in the woods. We're like New Yorkers and DC. So we're like, we're like, wait, we have to put the top on because a real bear could like come in here. So, this was totally, I mean, I grew up in the country, to be fair, but for the last, for all of our adult lives, we've been city people. So
where did you grow up in the country?
I actually grew up in King William, Virginia. I grew up some in Charlotte, North Carolina, but also King William, Virginia, where I lived in cornfields and we would explore in the woods. So that made me a little more comfortable with it, but it's been a while. So I was, we were out here and we were like, oh, did we hear a noise? Something's, what's going to happen? So it was sort of like city people in the country. And, we kind of, we did our best with it, but, I had my difficult moments for sure, because I'm just basically doing the sound. So the sound is really difficult. And, the sound, because you can get a good shot, but if the sound is messed up, it's, you can't fix it. So, so I was trying to hear everything with the sound. So if they didn't know their lines perfectly, I had so many other things I was thinking about, like, does it look right? Is the sound okay? Who's too loud? All of that I'm trying to do at the same time. So I would get frustrated if they did such a wonderful job learning all of these challenging lines. But that was where sort of I realized my limitations is that I'm like, oh, but I realized that people who have bigger budgets, they have all these people doing all this stuff for them. So maybe one day.
So Jeff, how did it feel going into your wife's world with the fungi and the science aspect of entering your wife's everyday professional world?
Great question. I love a challenge as an actor. A lot of times I'm doing stuff that's not challenging to me, and so this project was. And obviously, the scientific jargon, the words that Charlotte wrote based on her background as a neuroscientist, it was very difficult, to say the least. Say that right off the bat. Just to even be able to pronounce the words, let alone to memorize them and to understand what they what they mean. I had to, and so that was really challenging. But again, I love a good challenge. But it was a tough process to learn those words, to understand those words, to get into that world of a scientist, a guy who, fungi, who understands all this stuff and do that background work and do the research on it. So it was great to be able to do that, because that's part of the profession that I love, is I become this, this detective, this researcher guy who goes in and starts to research this role, his world, and then bring it to life, obviously, on camera. And so it was challenging, but it was great. I loved it.
And I thought he did a wonderful job, with this hard language. And my son did a great job too, learning a lot of challenging, because I kind of wrote him like an adult. I wrote him like saying adult things through a kid's mouth, which I thought was fascinating, because sometimes kids are like that. They're really
you had to, because of the story, without giving too much up, you had to do that because of the story. So
yeah, absolutely. So I think they had, it was difficult, but they did such a beautiful job. And even still, I'm a brain scientist, so I study the brain. So I don't know, I was always interested, as a beginning sort of biology student in fungi and or something. I had to ask my friends how to pronounce things, the ones who had done more plant work, or so it's not, they're not even plants, but they had to kind of give me some some background, which I studied a ton, because this isn't my area of, I did my PhD in neuroscience, so it's not my area of expertise at all. So I did a lot of research for it, and Jeff, I thought, just really was authentic for something just so different for him.
And what's as interesting is that out of the film came my enjoyment, or love of chaga tea. So I ended up buying chaga in chunks online and getting it delivered to the house.
That's
and then
awesome.
I found out you had to get a grinder And so you'd have to grind the chunks down in your coffee grinder. You take that powder and then you pour it, in the boiling water. You let it sit for 15 minutes, okay? And then you strain all that chaga out of there, and then you've got this tea. And it's fabulous. It's really good. I put, honey in there and a little bit of cream, and it's really delicious.
You have a new hobby. That's great.
Yeah, it's like,
weird stuff.
so I'm like this scientific guy in my kitchen with all these pots boiling and the chaga.
I'm like, I don't want all this weird stuff in the fridge for real in the real life.
So Charlotte, when you went to work and you went into the office and said, "Hey, I am going to do this movie," what was the reactions of your coworkers? They just stare at you? Did they say you're crazy or sugar? What did they do? What did they say?
Well, it's funny. So I it's weird, but I kind of keep it separate. So a few of my coworkers, I'll tell the side, because I am, when you do research and just work in science, it's very time consuming. It's sort of like all encompassing. So nobody could think, that, hey, you can make some films on the side, but it's something that it's like something, that I have to have a creative outlet. So I don't think that they were, I don't think that they're surprised so much as I don't share it widely just because it's sort of like, it's like some people's rock collecting and I like doing the films and editing and doing the music and all of that. So it's sort of like my hobby that makes me really happy and, makes them happy. So it's sort of a family bonding.
If you don't mind me asking this personal question, kind of going off topic, but why'd you go into science? Because I believe that more women need to go into the science field and be more appreciated. So why did you go into science in the first place?
Well,
What
I love
attracted
this
you?
question. No, I love this question because it's such an important thing. Like we need more women in STEM, and that's why there's a wage discrepancy in general, because we don't have enough women going into STEM, and these are generally higher paying fields. So a lot of times we're conditioned sort of at young ages to be teachers, which teachers are incredibly important. That's the driving force as to how we educate our youth. But when a lot of times we think, oh, well, we'll be a teacher, we'll be a nurse. Like nobody ever says, no, you're going to be a doctor or you're going to be a scientist. And I think it's changing over time, but it's not something that we condition little girls as much as we do little boys that we can actually do. So I never even tried taking chemistry. So I went back later when after my mom had died, and I thought, she had died. She had struggled with substance use disorders, and she died. And I thought, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to see if I can do science. I want to understand the brain. I want to understand why some people can get over mental illness or substance use disorders and why some people can't. And I just started doing it, and I really loved it. Like I love learning about biology, and I love learning about chemistry and psychology and neuroscience. And I realized, if you work hard enough, you can really you can get good grades in these subjects, and you can get about more and more of an interest. And so I just started following it and just liking it more and more. And there were like a few people that really believed in me. Like I had a chemistry professor who really, she had me teach her chemistry classes as an undergraduate. And I just thought, I can't believe people think I can do science. Like I never really thought about it before. So it's such an important question. And I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I'm really passionate about getting more women and girls to start doing science earlier for so many different reasons.
Why the brain?
Why the brain? So, well, I'm interested in the brain because, well, for the reason, as far as, my own personal history, just with my mother, et cetera, and wanting to understand behavior and what makes people make certain decisions. So I was really interested as a graduate student in impulsivity and learning and memory, and, why people make certain choices. I was really interested in reward related behavior. So, I wanted to understand, why is it that people make quick choices, or they make choices that are maladaptive in the long term? And I started just really getting so interested in this. Like I worked with rodents, I trained rodents for many years and worked with rodents and behavior. So I just was interested, why does that rat really have to go for the reward and the other rat can wait it out? Like I just wanted to understand, because it's so much like humans. Like why are some of us, we can't just wait things out when we should, when that's the better choice? And I just got really fascinated in what happens in the brain to cause certain behaviors. So that's kind of the root of it.
So you mentioned your mother. You basically are dedicating your life's career in your mother's memory. If you don't mind, tell me a little bit about your mother so we can learn who she was as a person, not because of what happened, but who she was as a woman and why she raised such a beautiful daughter and now filmmaker.
Well, that's another sweet question. And it's great to get to talk about her because she, she had so many wonderful traits. Like she was the most generous, funny person that anybody could ever meet. She was the homecoming queen. Like she was just this just vibrant, incredible human being. And she suffered from alcohol use disorder, which we grew up sort of watching this, and we just kept thinking, well, why can't she just stop drinking? Like it's just bad for her health. It sort of had caused her problems with her health over the years. And it's funny, we just finished an addiction documentary recently, and we touch on a lot of the addiction elements. But my mom was, and it's sort of been her memory that I've been doing work in addiction and in films. But she was this incredible human being who struggled with something that wasn't her fault. Like addiction is a disease of the brain. So it's she was. That's what I think I noticed as a child, and then growing up, and when I started to really study it, it makes you realize it's not really her fault. It's something that she can't control because it's a disease. And it sort of really helped me cope with what was frustrating to me when I was little, is getting an education to learn, this wasn't her fault. And if she had the right kind of tools and had enough sort of at her fingertips to be able to help her, she could stop. So, it was basically like saying this disease of the brain really messed with my mom, who was this incredible human being. So that's kind of what I remember is just her wonderful traits and the unfortunate aspect of her, of the substance use disorder.
Thank you so much for sharing about her, and may her memory always be a blessing to you
Aw,
and your
thank you.
family. Lastly, what's the websites and the social handles for this wonderful film? Because I think everyone should see it. It's beautifully shot. It's a beautiful story. So what are the socials and the website?
That's so sweet to say. Well, we have a page on our film company website, hollowmetropolisfilms.com, and there's a page on it, and we also have a Twitter for our company, Hollow Metropolis Films, which and anybody can reach us through those if they want to learn where it's screening. It's gotten into a few film festivals. I think there's one at Las Vegas at the end of the summer, and one in Chesapeake Bay, which is sort of near where it was shot. So they can certainly find us and reach out to us through that. But we're so grateful that you would take such an interest in our movie and take the time to ask all these thought-provoking questions. And it seems like you really care about sort of the, what's behind the stories. And I love that.
Thank you very much. Jeff, is there anything you want to say? I mean, anything else?
I think Charlotte has said it all. And you asked some really wonderful questions.
Well, thank you very much.
Questions that haven't been asked before, and digging in deeper, and which was really wonderful. So I think I'm glad you liked the film, and I'm glad you touched on the aspects of the location being one of the characters in the film, for sure.
There's one quick thing I wanted to add is Jeff is this very supportive person, because not every, he's supportive over everything that I want to do. He's this tremendously supportive human being who basically brings the best out of people. So if I say, hey, I want to shoot a movie, or I want to do the crazy ideas that I have, he supports those. And I think it's so important to have somebody like Jeff. If everybody had a Jeff, it would be a great world.
Everybody had a Charlotte.
And that's why I asked you, how did this change your marriage? How did this make your marriage stronger? Because, I mean, we hear all the time where couples are in business together, would be owning a restaurant or a grocery store or travel agency. They can't get along. They kill each other. But, you guys seem like you guys picked each other, you're happily married. And then, you guys are working on this film projects together. And now you have a second film on addiction. I mean, it's great.
Well, I'm the difficult one, and he's the super easy to get along with one. It's always got to be that way.
I do
the
appreciate.
dogs always go to him. Put it that way.
Awesome. I do appreciate you guys taking the time, and congratulations on such a beautiful film.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're so grateful for this opportunity. Love this interview, and we're so grateful for those wonderful questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a great day.